Hi guys, it's me, Mr. Wilson, and it's day 2 of Guardians of the Taiga. Okay, so by the time you're seeing this, the first chapter's probably been uploaded. It's taking forever. So, anyways, once again, thanks to Harper Collins Publishing for letting me read StacyPlays' book. Feel free to look her up on YouTube and watch some of her series. They're awesome. So, chapter 2. Stacy recognized those yellow eyes. Basil! She shouted, lingering over every syllable of one of her favorite names. It was Basil, a female in Stacy's wolf pack. Basil was the pack's beta, which meant she was second in command. Stacy was never quite sure whether Everest was the alpha or if she herself held that title. While Everest was the pack's leader in some manners, Stacy took the role in others. It was an unusual arrangement, not least of all because Stacy was human, but they were an unusual pack, and it worked for them. Basil, slender and athletic, emerged from the trees and sidled, oh my lord, and sidled up beside Stacy. Named after the purple flowering wild basil plants she could often be found nibbling on. Basil was pure white and had beautiful citrine eyes. "Hi girl, how are you?" Stacy asked, running her hand along Basil's sleek back. Basil crouched low to the ground, letting Stacy know she could climb on. "I'll see you two back at the cave," Stacy said over her shoulder to a tired-looking Everest and Noah as she gently swung her leg over Basil's back. Basil took off, trotting through the taiga in the direction of their home. Stacy lowered her chest onto Basil's upper back and wrapped her arms around the wolf's broad shoulders to signal to Basil she could go faster. Basil was the fastest runner in the pack, so fast that as the wolf broke into a sprint, the trees were reduced to a green blur, punctuated occasionally by the silvery bark of birch and larch trees. Stacy closed her eyes and laid her head to one side of Basil's soft neck. She was exhausted from a day's difficult rescue, but she always found a piece of a familiar rhythm of the wolf's steady gait. Stacy had no idea how she'd come to live in the taiga with 6 Arctic wolves. There was a fuzzy memory of the burning smell and when she'd woken up in the middle of the forest surrounded by a pack of wolves. She had a throbbing headache. Every time she tried to recall how exactly she'd ended up in so deep in the taiga forest, or who she'd been with, it was like trying to close her hand around a curl of smoke. Nothing. But as emotional as that day had been, her memories of it were not bad ones. She had felt only the wolves' warmth and concern. She remembered tall, regal Everest standing watch over them all, while Tucker, a white male wolf with a very thick coat, licked a gash in her knee. Basil and Addison, the other female in the pack, lay on either side of her, and she was nestled into their warm fur. As tears rolled down her cheeks, Noah brushed them away with his wet nose. He pushed something toward her, a fish he'd caught in a nearby stream, and somehow managed to skin and clean for her. Stacy ate it while Wink, the youngest member of the pack, sat nearby, a perplexed and curious look on his face. Wink was just a pup back then. When the 6 wolves found her, Stacy had a pretty impressive vocabulary for a girl so young. Whatever the accident had been, it seemed to have all been erased from her memories of her family, friends, and school, without affecting her intelligence one bit. She loved reading and writing. She also had a passion for nature and animals, and already knew quite a bit about the wildlife that was suddenly all around her. She guessed she was around 8 years old when it happened. 4 winters had passed since then, that remarkable October morning, so Stacy figured she must be about 12. Now, as Basil raced through the forest with Stacy on her back, Stacy turned to one of the most common and painful trains of thought, pressing on her like a bruise. What had happened to her humans? What had to have had a mother and father, but where are they now? She had seen animals abandon their young in the forest. When that happened, it was almost always because the mother didn't think they would survive. But Stacy hadn't been ill. When the wolves found her, though she was hurt, she was healthy and well fed. She had clearly been loved, and that much she knew. Where are they, these humans who had taken such good care of me? Stacy wondered. Did they lose me? Did they come looking for me? Have they given up? She considered going to look for her parents before many times, and she knew where she'd start, a small village bordering the western boundary of the taiga. Stacy figured if she asked enough of the villagers there, she eventually could find her parents. But since she had no memories of them, she wasn't entirely sure she wanted to find them. Notwithstanding the occasional wonderings about her parents, Stacy loved her life in the taiga with her wolf pack. She had seen humans plenty of times in the forest, and from what she'd witnessed, the world wasn't very appealing to her. When there was a heartless hunters with their guns and bows who threatened to kill the animals she loved. There were troubled teens who threw rocks at squirrels and birds, and careless campers who had no respect for the forest and left their campsites littered with garbage. Which reminds me, Silas, great job picking up that trash with your family. Sometimes that garbage was useful in the form of old clothes or books, but too often Stacy found herself cleaning up after them what they left in the woods. And once, one terrible spring, a construction company had come with the big land clearing machines, and many animals had lost their homes when it flattened a chunk of the forest to create a small electrical substation. It was uglier than anything Stacy had ever seen. Its chain link fences, messy cables, and metal towers were a blight on the beautiful forest she had come to call home. Stacy gripped Basil's fur, relieved that the substation was a decent distance from their cave, and buried her head deep in the thick pliage of Wolf's neck. After about 10 minutes of running, Stacy opened her eyes. Basil had slowed down enough that the individual trees and even the grayish-green lichen on their trunks had come back into focus. Stacy recognized the familiar parts of the taiga where she and the pack lived. Behemoth spruce trees and tall ferns dominated the landscape and continued up high onto the ridge before them. Tiny brown and red and white spotted mushrooms sprung up between the fallen pine needles that covered the forest floor, and a giant moss-covered boulder marked the entrance to a small clearing in the front of the ridge where the entrance to the cave Stacy and the wolves called home was nestled. Stacy was just climbing off Basil's back when Tucker bounded out of the cave and knocked Stacy to the mushy ground. She lay on a soft bed of brown pencil topped with orange pine needles and green moss, and reached up to pet his super soft white fur. "I miss you too, boy," Stacy said with a laugh. Addison was on his heels. She was a graceful wolf with a slight brownish tint to her light coat. She greeted Stacy by nuzzling her nose, and then dropped a newspaper beside her. Stacy laughed again. "I'm going to pretend you didn't sneak into the village to steal this off of someone's porch, Addie," she said. Addison eyed her with an innocent expression, but couldn't hold it for long. A mischievous look washed over her face before she darted away. Addison, the brainiest of the pack, had always seemed to be the wolf most concerned with Stacy's education. Addison was constantly turning up with books and newspapers she'd borrowed from who knows where. Once Addison had lurked behind the small library in the village to where they were thinning their shelves to make room for new books. Together, she and Stacy returned to the village in the middle of the night and gathered as many books as they could from the recycling bins where they had been discarded. Stacy had a full library ranging from picture books to novels like Charlotte's Web and her favorite, Island of the Blue Dolphins. There were history books and science journals that taught her about the world. There were even camping cookbooks that Stacy and Addison had looked at together and used to test some recipes. Addison was curiously clever for a wolf and had a proclivity for arithmetic. Stacy would never forget the summer spent in the clearing near the cave with Addison, who carefully watched Stacy use a stick to practice her multiplication tables in the soft dirt. Stacy figured she was likely the only girl in the world who could rightfully claim she had been homeschooled by a pack of wolves. Stacy carried the newspaper into their cave and laid it on a large wood table in the center. One she crafted herself from spruce that had been split in two and had fallen over in a storm last summer. She had used the sharp edge of a rock to smooth its surface with a dull shine. A slightly charred loaf of bread she'd baked for the day before sat on top. She cut 2 slices using a knife left behind by some campers and slathered it with peanut butter, another one of Addison's illegal acquisitions. "I have to talk to her about that," Stacy thought. "If too many things disappear, the villagers will start looking for a thief, and if they search the taiga, they might find me. I'd have to leave the forest. I'd never see the wolves again." She shook away those thoughts and walked over to a small waterfall in the back corners of the cave. She reached her hand through the trickling stream to the cool ledge behind it and felt until her hand clasped a small glass jar of blackberry jam she had made from the berries that grew wild in the forest. The cold stream of the water made for a perfect refrigerator. Stacy slathered the jam on the other slice of bread and pressed the two sides together to make a sandwich before wandering over to the cave's fireplace. There was a huge rocking chair next to it, and another one of Stacy's projects. One long winter afternoon, curved branches served as rockers, and she used sharp rocks as saws and sandpaper. Again, she really needed to talk to Addison about her thievery. To make the planks for the seat, back and arms, it was all held together with strong vines and even stronger glue made from pine sap. Stacy sat down with the newspaper in one hand and her sandwich in the other, while Basil was busy starting a fire in a massive stone hearth with a flint and steel. Fire starting was, Stacy had to admit, a rather peculiar skill for a wolf, but Basil was no ordinary wolf. None of them were. Stacy unfolded the newspaper to read the front page. The biggest headline immediately caught her attention. Village Council to address wolf problem. Possible bounty. The wolf population in the Taiga forest on the edge of the village is on the rise. 3 area farmers have lost livestock in the recent weeks, leading to calls for a wolf bounty to thin the growing population of predators. The wolves were a menace, said villager Orrin Webster. In the last month alone, I've lost 2 sheep and a cow to wolves. The wolves in the forest have no natural predator, added Amos Sheridan, who found a carcass of 2 of his sheep on the edge of the forest 3 days ago. They've depleted their natural food sources and have turned on our flocks. It has to stop. Both men pointed to the solution of the village enticed nearly 20 years ago, a wolf bounty. Hunters were paid a bounty. Ooh, this is a long chapter. Holy cow. They were paid a bounty of $50 for each wolf pelt they produced. After a year, the wolf population had decreased significantly, and the bounty was withdrawn. The program was considered a success by both the farmers and the village council. It's an interesting idea, the village councilwoman Eldna Myers said. The local farmers have asked us to consider reinstating the wolf bounty, and that's where we'll be looking at it carefully. And that's what we'll be looking at carefully in the coming weeks. We have to weigh all the factors and invite people on both sides of the issue to come forward. The council will hold its first meeting to discuss the issue on Monday in the village hall. Stacy suddenly felt a heavy weight on her chest. She took a huge bite of her sandwich and read the headline again. Her wolves weren't the problem. That much she knew. A small pack of Great Plains wolves, a breeding pair and a couple of juveniles, had moved into their part of the taiga a few summers ago. Their numbers had been steadily increasing ever since. Everest and Basil had both been anxious from the moment the new pack arrived, but the 2 packs had established an uneasy truce. As much as Stacy wished the wild wolf pack would move on to new territory, she didn't want her wolves to purposely try to drive the others away. They must have been the ones who killed the villagers' livestock. But why? It wasn't like the wild wolves didn't have a full run of the forest. Stacy and her pack were rescuers. They didn't hunt. They subsisted only on Noah's daily fish catches and Stacy's small garden, leaving all the forest's large mammals to the wild wolves' diet. As much as Stacy hated it, she understood wolves were carnivores and needed to eat. They must have increased their hunting radius to include the farmers' fields. And now that they tasted mutton, it was only a matter of time before they killed more sheep in the village. Stacy frowned and began furiously picking blackberry seeds out of her teeth. If the council passed, the bounty hunters wouldn't discriminate between Stacy's pack and the wild wolves. They would all be in danger. She didn't want to worry the others, but when Everest returned, she'd tell him what she'd learned. Maybe he can persuade the other pack to go farther north to a new hunting ground. Then the whole thing might blow over. Stacy ripped the article out of the newspaper and tucked it into her pants pocket. She couldn't risk the wolves finding out before she talked to Everest. She wasn't sure if Addison had managed to teach herself how to read, but Stacy wouldn't put it past her. Stacy had just started to eat the second half of her sandwich when she realized that something, or rather someone, was missing. Hey, has anyone seen... Before Stacy could even finish her question, that someone appeared. It was his wagging tail that Stacy saw first. Wink! Wink backed into the cave, his rear end leading the way. Wink's normally white fur, which puffed out in all directions, was dull, dirty gray. Stacy made a mental note to bring him to the river the next time she went to give a bath. His butt was sticking up in the air, his head was lowered, and seemed to be dragging something that required all his focus. Wink worked his way backward through the cave until Stacy could see what he was dragging. His jaw was clenched firmly around a bucket, brimming with frothy white liquid. Milk! Stacy exclaimed, jumping to her feet from a rocking chair. As he drew closer, the milk sloshed over the edge of the bucket and dripped onto the ground. Oh, Wink, did you take that from a farmer? How did you manage to get it all the way? Wink tried turning toward her, even losing more milk over the side of the bucket. No, just set it down. It was too late. The bucket teetered to one side. Milk spilled everywhere. Wink slipped, each of his forepaws sliding out from underneath him in a different direction, leaving him flat on his belly with his snout in a puddle. Wolves don't blush, but Stacy could tell how embarrassed he was. Tucker and Basil rushed over to lap up the spilled milk before it seeped into the cracks. Stacy sighed and cupped his muzzle. It's okay, Wink, she said, lifting him up. Thank you for the milk, but you are never to go to the farm again. Do you understand me? Addison had stepped into the cave just behind him, and Stacy realized she had to have a serious talk with her two mischief makers. Listen, I appreciate how hard it must have been to drag this milk across the forest, Stacy said, picking up the bucket. There were a few drops left at the bottom, and Stacy lifted the bucket to her lips, let it roll onto her tongue. This deliciously creamy milk. Stacy trailed off temporarily forgetting why she was discouraging Wink from bringing her all-time favorite treat to her. Then she remembered the bounty. And Addison, Stacy continued sternly, I know how quiet and careful you must have been when you were nabbing the newspaper. Addison and Wink both puffed up a bit at Stacy's praise. But what if the farmer had seen you, Wink? Or you, Addison, carrying a newspaper? I hate to break it to both of you, but from what I've read, neither of those things are normal behavior for a wolf. And anyways, I'd rather do without those luxuries than risk losing one of you. The last thing I need is for a villager deciding they want to capture a magical wolf, or worse, following you back to the forest with their gun. Both wolves looked contrite, at least for the moment, but a sudden noise outside the cave startled all three of them. I hope that's not a farmer looking for his milk bucket. And that's the end of chapter 2. So make sure you leave a comment down below what you think of our series so far. I'm sorry these videos are taking so long, but they're long chapters, okay? I will try to record chapter 3 sometime to upload. Hopefully tonight I can upload chapter 1 and chapter 2 so I can get those posted for you guys. I love you guys. I miss you, and I will see you soon. Bye!